So the reason why I brought this up is, you know what the subject of this podcast is?
The failures of Mike in February.
The increasingly poor decisions of Michael Dane. Yeah, that would be a
Yeah.
good podcast. But
Hello, Mike. Happy Thursday.
happy Thursday again, Jack. Hey, I wanted to let you in on a huge amount of failures I made this week.
Hmm.
So I got involved in trying to do something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and that's build a website. And you think, hey, isn't that what you do? You know, you're like, aren't you like a guy who builds websites? And I'm like, yeah, I am.
No, but I've learned from you that all you need is a one pager, so there is no way you can fail in that.
100%. Well, you're not far off, actually. Um, no, I have this project that I did about the universe, right? And here's this
Mhm.
poem, and I've put it into a book form, I guess, right? So I kind of figured out layout, and anyway, it's one of those projects that is like any project, I assume, right? Especially
Mhm.
since I'm doing it myself. If I was doing it with others, I might have had a better plan. But
Mhm.
it just so happens that I was like, yeah, I really need to do a website. In fact, my wife was just saying the other day, like, I've been 15 years, I need a website. And I'm like, you know, isn't that the thing now? Everybody needs a website. Maybe.
Mm.
You think by now it's all over, but who cares? All I meant is I wanted to build this website, and I've been putting it off. And just in case building websites um, is un isn't known by anyone watching. So it's, hey, you guys all need a website. Well, a lot of times what you do is you go to a provider or you go to a service that is a website building tool. And the one I use most often is WordPress because it's pretty nice. It's pretty understandable, but it has a very
Mm.
distinct architecture built for a certain kind of thing. Let's put it that way. The site I
Mhm.
want to build is not built for that thing, so it needs to be a custom website. So far,
Mhm.
pretty bad, right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
you don't have any off the shelf ways to do what you want to do, Jack or me.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, so you gotta start from scratch, right?
Mm.
And I'm guessing this is where most people turn to somebody who has more knowledge and ask them to do
Mhm.
it because that's what smart people do, right? They don't do it themselves. Why would you want to do that? It's too complicated. So the reason why I brought this up is, you know what the subject of this podcast is?
The failures of Mike in February.
The increasingly poor decisions of Michael Dane. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be a good podcast. But no, it's AI, and so guess what? I went and finally started to take a look at a thing called Figma Make. I guess, right? So I've used Figma forever. Figma is a great product that allows you to draw. That's all it really
Yeah.
was good at. And it became a kind of a de facto way to draw websites, which I always thought was kind of a weird thing
Cool.
to do. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
cool. Yeah, it's just
yeah, I mean, it's but drawing a website, has its inherent whatever, right? But to drawing people, hey, all you drawing people out there, I'm a drawing person. Drawing things is fine, right? Sketching thing, whatever. Like you can work out more problems when you don't have a lot of invested, you know, passion about stuff. So it's a great place. You can try a lot of stuff. It also started to reinforce a concept of a design library, right? Rather than just
Mhm.
inventing everything from scratch every time you started to draw, you started to use components, and then so that led some more systems thinking from designers. Designers just love to just make stuff up, kind of.
Mm.
So it put a lot more rigor, but to me, it also started to point the direction that we are going to be obsolete fairly soon, right? Because why don't you just build it has always been my thing. Like if you had an idea, why draw it first, then build it?
Mm.
And normally it's to communicate, and it makes sense. You draw a building before you build it. But hey, this is the virtual world. Like there isn't,
Mm.
it's not gonna fall down. It's like it's just a different world, right? Like you don't have to be good. You just need to get going. And so far, I'm assuming you as an architect, we're both, pardon me, architects in a way.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of pen and paper sometimes. Yeah.
Exactly, so it's like you're doing it because it's less threatening, right? Like, when you have
Mhm.
an actual thing, people are going to maybe have a stronger opinion about it. I don't know, whatever. So we're drawing these things, but now let's go to Figma. And I said, no, I didn't want to make this. Here, I want to make this thing. I want it to look like this, and I just started to describe it, just as we do with AIs. And lo and behold, it starts to build a React site for me. And now I'm a little bit wary of React, only because I'm old-fashioned and I like my stuff old-fashioned,
Mhm.
you know. And there isn't anything particularly about this thing I want to build that needs to be a React thing, but who knows? It's very happy to do React things. And it means it can build a little bit of a data table and, it can do some fancy stuff. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
it's not terrible. I'm not telling it no, because honestly, I don't care, right? Like, I'm just looking at the site and we go through, add a bunch of stuff, change stuff. But what was pretty fascinating, and kudos to Figma Make, it sort of made a site without any of my content that was pretty good and fairly close in a way to, it wasn't miles away from what I did, which took me a year, you
Mhm.
know, to write this thing. And I was a little surprised because it was not terrible at making up stuff, but it's an LLM. It's fairly clever. But
Mhm.
sometimes I had to go in and double check, like, wait a second, I wrote this part, you wrote that part. I had to I had to be a little wary. Anyway, so long story short, in about in a couple hours, I have a site, right?
Mhm.
So
Is AI still doing the lorem ipsum kind of placeholder text
no,
for it?
no, no. It wrote really good content. It wrote a whole poem, a
Mhm.
whole 24 stanza poem. Wasn't
Mhm.
my poem, but it was a poem. It did,
Mhm.
once I started to tell it what the topic was, it came up with the sort of footnote, like it was pretty much. Yes, very actually excellent point. It did not lorem ipsum at all,
Mhm.
which is kind of cool when you think, oh, maybe it's bad. Well, this is the point, right? So with great power. Anyway, so I get this site and I can just download it. So then I'm back in your neck of the woods. I'm in VS Code. I think you're in
Mhm.
VS Code all the time, right? Isn't that where everybody is all the time?
Yeah, well, I think that, now it's kind of like a little bit retro, right? I think everybody is now in some sort of an agent that is, maybe kind of like Gemini agent or Cursor agent. So VS Code is kind of a little bit now, I think, in trouble as a product.
Hmm. Okay.
But
Well,
yeah.
good to know. I'm agnostic. All I know is that I brought the solution into VS Code and then wanted to build it locally because I wanted to do it all, like, you can't do anything really complicated in Figma Make. You can only
Mhm.
do design stuff. So I wanted to swap out all the imagery. I wanted, you know what I mean? I wanted to do all that stuff, like file management stuff that you need to do when you build a site. Anyway, so I want
Mhm.
to do all that local because I couldn't do it. I couldn't say, here's the picture for state number 17 or whatever, page 13. Like, you can't do that in Figma Make. That's why it was so good that it didn't lorem ipsum. It went out and it searched and it found Unsplash. You've heard of Unsplash before? Anyway, so it found imagery. It was really good. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
it
yeah.
was, yeah. I mean, it was
Mhm.
like totally. I mean, I would say 100% solid kickoff style stuff. Remember Sprint Zero? Remember when those things used to exist? Like, this would be like if you came in with this in Sprint Zero, you'd be
Mhm.
way ahead. You'd be
Mhm.
months ahead of where we used to be, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what's so wild is that, yeah, it would take us months, it would take us weeks just to figure out how to partition and build a space to work in. And hopefully
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
it's a couple of lines that by the way, the LLM will do for you. So far you want to see, okay, so I'm doing great, killing
Okay.
it, got this great site
Mhm.
on top of the world. And where do I start to mess up? Well, weirdly, one thing that happens that screws up a lot is my computer. So I have a Mac.
Mhm.
I've always had a Mac, and lately I've just been having trouble with this Mac. And the one thing that Macs do that you probably don't do is they have a thing called iCloud, right? So
Mhm.
what
Mhm.
happens is that all of your devices, especially a computer and especially all your mobile devices, are all kind of like there isn't any data local to that thing. All the data is stored on the cloud, and just in case, right, you need all your photos or your documents or
Mhm.
whatever you work on, it's not on your computer. So when your computer gets blown up, like you remember the good old days when we, didn't have that.
There was a little bit of a floppy disk, anxiety.
Oh, I mean, the anxiety was always there. I mean, always there. I certainly remember, and this isn't a computer, but I remember a friend of mine, we were out with them screwing around and they lost their phone. And it was like, when you lost your phone, you also lost all of your contacts and all of your contact information, right? Like that was the thing. Like that was the place you put this. And if you misplaced it,
Mhm.
bad things would happen. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm on my computer and I just so have happen to have it always being part of the cloud. And I'm starting to see like really weird behavior, right? So I'm trying to build, if you're sorry, developer, non-developers, but you run a server, you run and you build your little thing and then you can see it.
Mhm.
It's like anything that requires a server. So I don't know. Is that something you can explain better than me? You're smarter.
Well, if you are running a website, right, and you have those scripts, then you really need to have something like an application server, right, that is able to run the show behind the front HTML, right?
Well, and that's where I'm going with this, right? So you happen to know that, hey, I get this page, but this page might not really exist. Actually, this
Mhm.
page probably doesn't exist. It's just created based on some data and whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's just a bunch of variables. That's why designers, probably work in Lorem Ipsum because we're like, we don't know what it'll look like. And half my career
Mhm.
is like, you really need to know what it's going to look like if you're going to design it. Like, you need to know
Mhm.
what the data is going into your page, but that's a different topic.
Mhm.
So anyway, I'm doing great, except I'm starting to see all these weird behaviors, right? These builds just are very slow. It's not working. And guess what I do is we're in 2026 now. So I go over to my little chat window and I'm like, this thing is broken, you know? Fix it. Okay. So now, because I don't know what I'm doing, right? I know what I want, but I don't know how to do it. And I don't want to learn how to do it. I think this is
Mhm.
important to
Mhm.
my screwing up, right? Because I
Yeah,
don't care. I just
sound like my students.
exactly, right? Like I just want an A. Can I just go
Mhm.
straight to that? And you're like, no, no,
Mhm.
no. I have stuff for you to what? Stuff to do? What kind of racket
Yeah.
is this? You know,
Mhm.
exactly. So you're trying to negotiate, but now you have this very willing servant. And amusingly, I'm not sure when this happened, but are you familiar with the DeepSeek reasoning model? I guess it's called the reasoning model. Came out a year ago or whatever.
Yeah, there's quite a story behind it, right? Like, not very flattering for the DeepSeek makers, right? But basically, they exfiltrated, a frontier model from US by basically having millions of or hundreds of thousands of simultaneous conversations with that model and extract its knowledge. But
Oh, really? Well,
but that
good for them then. Like
Yeah, yeah, it's a business practice. I mean, some people say, hey, it's kind of like natural, kind of like market pressure, right? But the fact is that on reasoning jobs, an exfiltrated model, like maybe not actually created from scratch, from the source data, right, is always going to be weaker on the reasoning models than the source. that they used for.
It's what
Maybe
do they call it? A Xerox, right? It gets a little bit
a little
blurrier.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have no evidence that it happened, but there's some posts about that about this process, which is a lot cheaper, a lot faster. So you don't have to spend $100 million on actually running the foundation model kind of from scratch or from the data source, right? So, but I have no evidence. But I'm just saying that a reasoning model might be weaker that way.
Well, all I know about a reasoning model, and the reason I bring it up is because you have a very small window, and you say something like, "Go do this thing," like as we do. You're like, "Hey, go make your bed," and we're not gonna teach you how to make your bed. We're just gonna tell you that, and then assume that you'll just figure it out. And these models, what they do is start to create this super verbose thing, right? Like, hey, this person's telling me to make my bed. What's a bed? Oh, wait, beds are those, anyway. And it just goes on, and it makes this really big contextual thing that it then puts in to do something, right? And it's just funny because you're watching it sort of like it's like when you're in a meeting and someone you could hear their thoughts, like, what is Jack talking about? Jack is just going on and on again. I'm just going to tune out. And by the way, when was the scores of, you know what I mean? Like, if you could hear what goes on in people's heads, it's probably what goes on your screen while you're waiting it for Deuce to do stuff. And I just find it's amusing because it's always kind of like, again, it's like an internal dialogue. You're not supposed to see it, but it displays it to you anyway. Like you could be like, wait a second, that's not what I meant by bed. I meant the flowers. Anyway, you're supposed to, in theory. Okay, so anyway, so I'm telling it to do all these things, and sooner or later, it's more like, hey, should I run grep? Should I run so and so? And I have a vague idea of these things, but I don't care, and I don't know the syntax, and whatever. I'm like, I just want this to work. Can you just like get this to work? It's that feeling of like you got somebody in to fix the drain, and you're standing behind them, making sure they fix the drain. It's that feeling. You're not going to do anything, but you're definitely going to have ideas. Should you be turning that? No, you should anyway, what do they call it? Backseat driving. I guess that's the feel, right? Like, I don't know how to do it, and I don't know what needs to be done, but I definitely have an opinion on what you're doing. So I'm there and I'm trying to build this thing and things just aren't working and nothing is coming out right and all this other kind of stuff. And I start to kind of realize, maybe later, too late, that all of these files are being backed up into the cloud, are then stressing my computer out. So it is dumping those files, these dependency files, to the cloud and not having anything local. So what happens, and maybe you know this, or maybe you're laughing because you know how many dependencies there are in these stupid libraries? There's like 1 million files in these things.
Yeah, it's a jungle. Yeah.
Oh, it's a huge mess. And when you consider they're all like 2K, it's like, oh, well, now you're going back and forth with Apple trying to reconcile this 2K file every single time I build, which is every single time. Right? So it is a huge mess of what is that called? Well, so what is it? The poor decisions of me. So then I'm like, wait a second, I have to get this thing out. I have to get it out of being indexed. Well, then we get into the world of my computer is now just in complete hell, right? It can't sync. I've turned on and off all the settings to sync so many times that it doesn't know where it's at half the time. And the reason I bring this up and reason I bring up AI, I guess, should I get to the point? Are you happy enough with this story?
It's a good story. Yeah, it's just.
But
you don't feel the pain. You don't feel the pain of that. A library conflict and stuff like that until you actually do it. So I think that it's it has been those were the jobs, right? I mean we often talk about
well, right, that's where I'm going. Like, to know how this stuff actually works is now even more incredibly valuable to me, right? Because we don't care how it works, I guess, because we're so high in the abstraction layer. I mean, I know we're going to debate in a minute about whatever AI did this week,
Mhm.
because that's the thing is that everyone's expectations are one, always there, always works. You see what I mean? Like our mental model of this technology, I think is way far off from reality because I'm thinking like, well, wait a second. I'm just read, and we can talk about this article too. You know, it just says if your latency is less than point or less than 2 seconds, right? You have no user experience and no one will like your product.
Mhm.
Well, that's a pretty amazing, um, right? Like that's harsh. That
Mhm.
whatever this stuff does, it better do it quick, or else it's worthless. You know, and I think I'm just sitting there trying to move a file over. You know what I mean? Like, and it's taking me literally. It took me about took way longer to figure out how to deal with these files than it did building the site.
Mhm. Yeah.
So the issue would be is if I'd gone the old route and I'd built the site, by hand, which I've done a lot. It's not hard. It's pretty fun, and then you can make your decisions by hand and you build this thing over time. You start to have at least a tacit understanding when you break something, why it broke and what was going on. But when you don't care, I think it's really interesting. And I think we're going there quick, right? Like
Mhm.
who in the world would want to do all the silly things that I did, even if half of those things were pointless, which I'm guessing they were, because it really is not very good at meta level understanding of itself,
Mhm.
right? Like it can't be like, whoa, you shouldn't put this in this directory. You really need to put it. And again, it could never figure out that I put it in the wrong context, right?
Mhm.
To be continually backed up. And again, why did I have it? Because, well, and then I actually called up Apple and had a fun conversation because I really thought I had destroyed it, right? I'd gotten all my work, I'd gotten it done, but I had had such issues with it that I figured this is the time when I would actually corrupt it. And it was corrupted, and
Mhm.
therefore,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
couldn't recover any of my work. And that seems to me like this fear of loss thing, we'll get into in a minute, right? But fear of loss is way more powerful than the hour I spent doing it. You know what I mean? Like, have you ever had this situation where you write like your term paper and then you lose it and you have to write it again?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, and I always
Yeah.
say the second version is always much better than the first version that you lost. That's all you have to remember. It's a real pain to
Mhm.
do it,
Mhm.
but most of the hard work was already done. You just have to redo it.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I mean, I think you may have, in kind of like uncovering several areas here and several kind of aspects of your mistake. So,
Tell
so
me more
I
about my
think,
mistake.
yeah. So your mistake is actually layered. So
Hmm.
first, maybe in the agentic world, what we are seeing right now is that there is people making a lot of money building companies that take your text, your content, basically that initial prompt that you had, maybe some initial pictures. So they are actually taking websites and converting them into MD files, pretty close to what we had in the early days of internet, because at that time we had no JavaScript, no nothing. It was just a heading tag, and then there was maybe an image, and you wrote the caption just in
Yeah,
case the image didn't show up, and then maybe those deep blue hyperlinks that were there. So now we are reversing to
underline.
that. Yeah, we are reversing to that state because the primary customer of the internet is going to be not no longer the you and I. It's going to be the bot. And the bot doesn't want to see your website. The bot wants to see the text, maybe the pictures, maybe some stuff, and it's going to be pretty much, like a very early HTML page or an MD kind of like extract of that. So that's your one kind of fundamental error, Mike. I cannot believe that you did that. The second
It's
the second
me.
fundamental the second fundamental mistake is that now the real value is in your prompt and what you wanted to kind of put your system description that you put into your agent to build the website. That was the real value thing. And what we see now happening is that there is something like, there is a post now from Perplexity that Perplexity has now the computer, so they just announced the computer.
Yeah,
so right. So what's going to happen is that actually Perplexity wants to build that website for me as a user. They don't want to see your website. They may be interested in your knowledge or your content, but they will build agentically this thing within the Perplexity computer or a myriad of other applications that will be out there. So this is a radical shift that we are experiencing. And I think that the website as an art form maybe is going to remain, but then a website as a kind of like maybe something that we kind of put out there for information. The consumer is not going to be a human, or it's going to be in a vast minority, in my opinion.
I mean, I think one thing I do agree with you is yes. I guess why am I doing? Well, that's a good point, and maybe that is maybe even bigger meta question. Of course, is why to continue to contribute to this medium, right? Like, and all I can think is that's why I've shifted. The world of design and the world of UX. This is a little shaky right now. It was boom times for a while. However, just like with many things, I don't think we ever had a real seat at the table. Even though I think we added a lot to the world, right? Like you said, it is a it's really hard to kind of give it the world of books and libraries and bookstores and stuff and to try to attach that to the internet because it was just so different, right? We didn't, until archive.org, which was pretty early, like we never capped anything. Everything was kind of disposable. It's sort of like leaflets, I guess back in the day, people would get a leaflet on their way to somewhere and then they'd be like, okay, here's just something to pass the time as you're in your horse-drawn carriage and you can read about whatever. And usually there's a pitch at the end to send a dime to somebody or whatever. Like these were ephemera, and I think as we reach campaigns are happening now, right? Remember, we'd have campaign buttons and we'd have, they're just ephemera. They're not worthwhile. And I always thought the internet, to me, suffered from that because it's like, wow, some of this is really good. And some of this is temporarily, hey, our podcast, right? So we're in our second year maybe, right? So, what's the value of episode 2? I don't know. Maybe someday I'll go back and watch it and be like, oh, we predicted X that ended up being a big deal, which I'm sure you did, right? I'm just the one who makes mistakes in this podcast, but the idea is that time was a big problem in my mind, So while it might take Vladimir Nabokov, it might take him a year to write a book that we might treasure forever. Stephen King probably puts one out every couple of weeks. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And which ones hold up over time beats me. You know what I mean? It's like, well, the one you liked when you first read him or something. How many Jack Reacher novels are there? You know what I mean? There's these things where they just, like, they can just make more of these things seemingly without any effort. And and does that mean like the 27th was that series? It was like A is for Apple. And so anyway, so it definitely needed 26 volumes just to do the whole alphabet. But should you start with Z? Well, either way, all these were problems that I thought the internet suffered from badly, like temporal problems, like what's good and what's bad and what's today's news and what's garbage. Because I think I even turned on a YouTube once and they were just talking very adamantly about something. And it took me a minute to realize, oh, this is like a couple years old. This is old news, right? The thing that you were concerned about is no longer relevant to today.
Mm. Yeah.
Anyway, as I said, and I don't know that I don't know that AI understands time either. That would be another podcast right there. It probably doesn't, does it? Ooh, that kind of sucks, right? Like,
Well, I mean, it's even. I mean, maybe we can use even kind of like more kind of direct example because UI combines a number of different things, but it's usually not obvious to a viewer like what a good AI, I mean good user interface, right, is right. I mean, it's kind of like a little bit more difficult, but we have now those video generating models, right? I mean, I'm sure you saw the one that is generated like I think Tom Cruise fighting Brad Pitt, in some sort of a hand combat, and that was just from a prompt, and
oh yeah,
that video looked like amazing, right? And so now what you have there, right? I mean, what's it's a very serious art form, filmmaking. And what are we supposed to think about that, right? So it's the same situation here with the web design, UI, and the user experience and all that stuff. And some people say that we have to kind of get into this exclusivity mode where there's going to be computer generated stuff. It's kind of like a mass market kind of a deal, and then there is going to be somebody that took the paintbrush and made the painting, and that is a totally different ballgame, right? And maybe people would actually gravitate towards that because the other area will be saturated, right? You can have a million of your favorite movies versioned, you can have whatever, but that painting is, it's unique, right? And you're gonna associate more value with that rather than the saturated kind of digital world generated by AI, right? So perhaps that's kind of what I meant maybe with the kind of like an art form of a website, right? Like, hey, maybe it's going to be an expression, right? I kind of, okay, I did it maybe with AI, but I had to prompt it, right? I had to kind of spend some time kind of tweaking it. Whereas, the automation of the mass-produced media is going to maybe, it's going to be great for a while, but then it's going to kill it, right? Kill the underlying value.
well, yeah, and I think there's two things, right? There's what is now unfortunately called content, and then there's what's funnily called a wrapper, right? So when you go to a place like Facebook, like it doesn't matter, people it kind of ignore the wrapper, right? And that's what I had it do is it created the wrapper, which is actually the hard, somewhat the hard part. You do need to create different wrappers for different kinds of content. So if I had my blog content, you'll need a whole bunch of conventional things just to manage that amount of possibility. And of course, this is like a what do they call it? You don't have to log in. Like this is impersonal. Like this isn't. So I figured once sites become personalized, design is just a content wrapper problem, and then as a designer, you're just trying to merge the two. Elegantly, right? Like you don't want your navigation to overpower your meaning. And that was my poem, right? Like it has navigation. It honestly did a great job without much prompting. It had a sequential back and forth. They were all mapped to arrow keys as well. All the kind of little things that, in real life are a drag that you'd have to go seek out and find. And transitions, animation transitions, I would normally just get a library for that and have to kind of plug them in. But it managed to write some nice transitions. And, I think they have that now where people, at least I see it advertised, is, hey, you got to do that big presentation tomorrow. Here, just dump your document in here and then we'll make the presentation for you. And there was a little thing there because it's not like I haven't spent a lot of my career doing this. It's like put your branded, make your thing a template that's branded, right? Don't do your own presentation, right? You're supposed to, anyway, sorry. My entire career has been trying to get them to use the PowerPoint template. properly, right? And I'll just say, I just finished my course, and they gave me all the templates. These templates are all done in Word, and they're all literally as horrible as you can imagine working with, right? Like they're these little idiosyncratic nests of crap that somebody did, but they never thought of this as a system, right? They never thought of this as being anything but what it was, is just, hey, put the name of your course here, then it'll be a header, put this here, but times 1,000 of these little things. And honestly, I think we spent most of our time complaining about the template with me and the people working on it, which was amazing. And maybe that's why they never used my template. But fortunately, if you don't have to use it and you can just get AI to do it for you,
yeah,
well, good. I guess it'll get you to do it. Will it be a good presentation to watch? I'm kind of curious. What if all the presentations, I have to do a presentation in just a few minutes, actually, of my course. And what they warned me to do is not do a presentation. And I said, yeah, trust me. I know if one thing I do know about slide decks. Sorry, Jack, I know this is going to be antithetical, but one, they can never have words on the screen. Right? It's like there are some rules. I mean, this is talking about pro decks, right? When you're doing a real presentation, you want people focused on you. And the more you reference the slide, the less attention they pay to you. And then sooner or later, they just don't pay any attention at all, right? They're like, can you just give me the slide deck and I'll read it? You know, like that's kind of slide deck 101. Sorry, everybody out there. But what I mean is, could it illustrate your ideas? Or is it just going to put things, you know what I mean? Is it just going to put words on it? I don't know if AI is that good now, but it did a really excellent job finding imagery that matched, finding the right design patterns that were also mobile friendly. Huge, right? That's pretty good. Managed to write Tailwind pretty well, which I am not crazy about because you have a million classes on everything, but okay, you know, I mean, it did fine with that, right? It managed to style things properly. You know, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Like I said, if I'd come into a project with this prototype, we would start to have some good discussions with a client, right? Like, hey, what, you know, what do you really want at this point? So I'm kind of still futuristically saying, it just takes away a lot of the stuff that used to be about us being human and thinking things through slowly and making a lot of low-level errors. Now we're just going to make catastrophic errors, I guess, right? And that's what this article was about. I mean, you mentioned did you get to take a look at this? Who's our friend, the writer here? Because I really liked it. It was this is Ian Harper, Ian with an extra A and an I in it. Ian Harper wrote a Into the Jungle reality check on AI agents, our topic from last week.
Yeah, there is a lot of wisdom in that piece. I mean, it's you can definitely see that there's things. I mean, if you have, you know, a large number of options, if you have large number of features that you can develop in real time, and you can do this and that, then yeah, you can actually run into a psychological, you know, problem, you know, just sensory overload, right? So I agree with those statements. So yeah, that was a very good piece. I mean, I forgot the title, but yeah, it's yeah.
Well, I will say that I hope she's watching, but my sister's, or my wife's sister, is called this morning, and she's very upset about Claude and the government and anyway, whatever the news is of today, I guess, because she just found that this was well, it's really upsetting, and reached out to me, which I appreciated. And I kind of wrote back, I'm like, okay, I don't get upset about AI anymore because I feel like the mental models are all over the place. So if you are going to take the guardrails off of an AI model and say, tell me how to kill everybody, I'm kind of like, okay, like, that seems like a supervillain sort of thing. Like, what if it told you? It wouldn't tell you anything particularly useful.
Mm.
I don't think, unless it says, yeah, you really need to go back to do mustard gas. Like that was really some good killing we did back then, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
we are
know.
going, yeah, we are going back to all the sci-fi stuff, right? I mean, very first Alien, right? They find they find the creature on that planetoid, and all the computer wanted was to, crew expendable. Let's bring the creature, right? That was the primary directive, and there was a robot that was an android,
Yeah,
and
right,
had
right, right.
exactly the same
On the way,
principle.
and
So.
Day of the Earth Stood Still, it was a nice robot, wasn't it? It was us that
Yeah,
it's us that are
yeah,
the problem, is always the
yeah,
sci-fi answer,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So the theory, it would be an interesting discussion. Why Data was such a helpful android, but the android from the first Alien movie and maybe from the second too, I don't know, because but they were different, right? Like they had they could be swayed, so the guardrails maybe were different, or maybe this is not just about the guardrail because what is a guardrail, right? The guardrail is basically okay. So you have the model that you are saying, mustard gas, would be great, and then you are trying to layer like like statements like be ethical, right? Be helpful. Do not continue any conversations about people kind of being down or
Self
whatever.
harm
Yeah,
probably is in there. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So all you need is you take this potentially, very kind of like direct, so to speak, kernel that you've got, and you try to kind of give it voice commands, right? And those are very easy to jailbreak. Those are very easy
Oh yeah,
to circumvent.
always. Sure,
Yeah.
because again, it
Yeah.
doesn't care. It's like me just telling it just wants to do its thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So is there ethics that can be embedded maybe deeper? Is there some sort of a higher level purpose that can be embedded deeper? Maybe the Commander Data from Star Trek had that, right? But we don't have it right now. We are just
Which
training.
ironically, Brent Ratner is supposedly the biggest asshole ever, right? Which is everyone
Yeah.
else. Frank's, the beard, everybody else is always really nice, and they're like, God, we just hated to be around that guy. I mean, maybe it was the makeup. I don't know, but
Yeah, must have been that. But so what we've got, we have, but why we have that, right? We have the training set. Well, we have the Reddit, right? We have Wikipedia, we have all the
sure.
internet we are dumping on the neural network. So maybe the root cause is that data dump during the training phase that is really deeply flawed. And maybe if there was a little bit more ethics in there, then we wouldn't have that problem.
Yeah, so my phrase, and this is interesting, is that 60% of the time it works every time. I don't know if you've ever
Yeah,
if you've ever watched
that's a good
if
one.
you if you've watched Anchorman. I like the phrase because it's pretty human that if things work in our experience, they're reliable, right? Like we tend to over rely on things. And this is the engineer versus the artist. So you could be the engineer or
Yeah,
I'll be the engineer. But the engineer is like, no, I mean, I need to be 99.9% sure that this bridge is not going to fall over, right? That's
yeah.
kind of and how do you do that? Well, I'm going to rely upon like really, a very long chain of stuff from Newton on to make sure that as far as I'm able that I will not violate any of these rules, right? Like so you have the rules of physics that you have to obey. Now, if your device or whatever misbehaves and breaks apart and kills somebody, right? Happens all the time. You want to blame somebody. You're like, well, your application of this very, hopefully solvable problem was done poorly, like me. I just screwed up everything, right? But I'm in a threat-free zone because I'm just making some art here. You know what I mean? Like there's no one will be harmed by my website and its contents and et cetera, right? But I was going to say I have a book. I don't know how far back you go in American history, but it's a book called Steal This Book by Abbie Hoffman. And the point of Steal This Book, good title by the way, right, is it's a bunch of counterculture stuff and recipes for bombs and talking about how do you survive in the city, where do you go in each city to find cool people that won't harass you, and how do you escape the war, draft dodging, and it's just like an instruction manual, And if it was part of the training for AI, which it probably should be, or maybe is, or who knows, right? Like ideas like this are not uncommon. And in fact, in fiction, like you just said, you just saw two people fight. We happen to know from reality that people in movies don't actually fight, right? And normally, not only do they not fight, if there is any possibility of them fighting, people stand in to fight for them, who have a similar build and a similar jacket or whatever, right? And right, because it's fake. We assume it's fake. And whenever we see actual real fighting, I hope most people are kind of nauseated, right? Because it's like real fighting is bad. Hopefully doesn't take place between famous people. But if it does, boy, are we fascinated, right? But like you just said, the ability to generate it and the veracity of it is part of this content layer we're talking about, right? Like it isn't real. It's just stuff that went into a container, a movie, got shown to you, and you pay attention or not and forget it or don't. You know what I mean? And that's where I meant this idea of topicality is important, because if you're going to be ethical, how long have they been working on this?
Well,
fairly. I mean, I'm pretty sure the Greeks really did figure this out quite a long time ago, right? Like they were pretty, this Plato, Socrates, like they weren't screwing around, right? They were trying to figure out how to be a good person.
Yeah, but they even in the in the old times, they were facing the same problem, right? They were facing the same computer issue, right? Like the human brain at the time, at the time of Plato, right, Socrates, was kind of like this fixed system. So you could kind of you could have like a written poem about ethics or written books about ethics. But then there was this question, okay, is the person going to read it, right? Is the person going to understand it, right? Or is the person who got all the perfect instruction how to deal with those philosophical or ethical issues, how is that person going to be able, is this subjected to being swayed the other way? Right. And right now we have exactly the same thing, right? The large language models, sure, we can present this, all this ethics to them as text, right? Or actionable items or whatever. But then are they really understood in the context of everything else that is kind of in the LLM? And are they going to be able to act on it accordingly? Or can they be very easily swayed the other way? And perhaps that's not something that we can answer, this year, maybe next year, but I don't think there is a model for actually deep rooting something as ethics into a model, right?
Well, right, because ethical action is what we're talking about. Unethical thinking, I think, is just par for the course, right? Like we can think all sorts of terrible things, but hopefully, we were just talking about this. It's like, being curious about terrible things is nothing new, and I think all kids do it probably constantly, right? Because they don't know, they don't know anything. They have to explore these things, somehow. And what we try to do is give them relative safety, but still, that's part of at least a big narrative in my family is the ability to go and make mistakes. Maybe that's how we wrap this up. I'm like, you're going to have to do all these things and do them badly, just like everybody else. And just because Plato told you not to, is not going to be as compelling as your friend saying, come on, that's the point, right? Like you don't answer to higher powers often. You answer to situational things. And I do think, and I wrote last, I do think somewhat GPT can be a place to experiment without penalty. That would be fine if you wanted to say, question what people say or something like that, or question your own beliefs, which is fun, right? Like, hey, I always thought the Earth was the center of the universe, and then you can talk to GPT and maybe it could talk you out of it, like. But it could just say, no, the sun's the center of this solar system, and you're wrong. And you'd be like, well, that's not very convincing, you
Yeah.
know? But that's where I'm getting at, rhetoric isn't, what do they say? Follow the money. You know what I mean? Like there are realities in our lives that are not modeled in our work. The just because you've read Kahneman on economics doesn't make you an economist, as I'm about to explore with my class. Just because you know how to do something doesn't mean you can do it. And my fear is that if we accelerate too much, we get into what I thought the real nice part of this is that as agentic AI starts to make decisions in some realms, it's going to do, to me, we're like a 60%. I'm going to call out everyone in the medical profession, right? I'm like, probably about 60% of the time, things work out okay. That's pretty much the best you're going to do. That's like vaguely competent, which is great. Overall, it's fantastic, right? And it makes the world a better place consistently. If we were terrible at everything, 40%, things would go badly for longer. You know what I mean? So I think we're vaguely good. That's super optimistic, but we're not 90%. There's nothing that reliable, even though our bridges are holding up. We do need to provide, we have maintenance. Our roads don't last forever, no matter how well we build them, right? Like nothing here is beyond fallibility. So we always need to take care, and we always need to have people do this, I think. But the point he was making is that the failures, if AI was to diagnose things, they would be way better than humans, right? Like, there's no doubt about it. They're going to be, let's call it, order of magnitude more accurate than humans. But when they make a mistake, it's going to be catastrophic. And because there isn't anyone to blame, right, that's the failing where we won't do it at all. So if we had all of our nuclear weapon defense systems, remember this back when they were all tied to NORAD and that people had keys, whatever, right? Like, and how many times it was wrong, which was every single time, right? Like, it was always wrong that there was these incoming missiles, and people were just like, yeah, I just don't know if there really are those missiles. I don't think I'm going to end the universe right now until I find out. So that's the problem, is like, yeah, if it was an AI that one time it was sure that we're all going to be destroyed, would be the worst decision, because there's too much behind it, but there's too much for, you know what I mean? The urge of being cheap is it's too good. So maybe, I guess I could say, I'm always treating AI like art, right? This is just your opinion. You know what I mean? This is just an artistic expression like any others. You have to take it in kind and do the best you can with it. Don't treat it as, anything, because we're just not, nothing's perfect.
Yeah.
But as we mix things together, I don't know. How about, you're an engineer? Engineers should be able to make perfection, right? Isn't that your whole point?
Well, that might be a kind of, we are running out of time, but the perfection is kind of, the definition of perfection is in engineering is kind of difficult. The reason all the bridges and all the skyscrapers are standing is that they are over-designed, so they are bigger and heavier by a factor of 2 or 3 or sometimes a lot more. So that if there is a big mistake, right, somebody forgot to weld, right, or some, and maybe wrong material was used, or maybe the foundation is actually not that strong as we thought, the bridge is still going to stand, right, even if it's kind of half rusted or whatever. So that is the perfection in engineering, right? Like, you overbuild, right? You assume the worst and you do that. Now in AI, we don't have that, at all, right? So the layers that kind of exist in terms of the verification, right, the supervision or whatever, are very difficult to build. They have to be external because whatever is happening in the neural network is a black box, right? So there's this kind of concept of engineering where you can take an X-ray of a rivet, right? You can take an X-ray or kind of look inside the material, right? Or maybe you can stress test something. You can put like before the bridge is actually allowed to the for full operation. In some countries they are actually stress testing, so they will take like hundreds of concrete mixers and they park them on the bridge, right? So that kind of thing was still going on in the past. Now it's all computer simulated, but it's more explicit. Now in neural networks, we don't do that because perhaps if we stress test it, every time the stress test will be a failure, right? You would jailbreak whatever worst behaviors that you were intending to. So you will kind of get some sort of a kind of mutual understanding that, all right, we're gonna have some sort of a guardrail there, but really you shouldn't be saying that to the AI, right? Then I think we are we are in different environments here.
Well, and we will continue with this because the interesting thing about having AI generate a thing about Tom Cruise and so fighting is, for one, I thought was interesting in context where we were, is like, what age were they? That's another fun thing. Was it their current selves? Was it their prior selves? Because I used, for my AI thing, I used a video of Ryan Gosling talking about LLMs, which was generated like by somebody a year ago. And what's interesting about that, and maybe better for the next time, is what if it doesn't know? Like, is it going to make up Tom Cruise? Right? Like you kind of assume, right, that there's training, fairly good training, that allows it to understand what a Tom Cruise is. And what is great about art is part of our goal is to make something that you don't recognize, right? Maybe bits and pieces of it you do, but like a collage, like you're just recombining things in unique ways. And I'm still, I'm wondering, it's very new for this kind of thing, but it's not very good. I think it's very good at copying, but it's not very good at contextualizing, like building new contexts out of something. And I don't think it could. Again, it's just an LLM, right? It's doing pattern matching. It's just following orders. Like, hey, I want to see this. And just like with me, I can't tell it more concretely what I want because I don't know what I want. I kind of know if I see it, if I like it. And yeah, again, maybe something for next week. We are out of time as always. It's good talking to you about this. But the interesting thing is, I do think it's fun. It's this idea we're gonna take out the ethics part, and that is worrisome to people. And I'm like, that's not how this thing. You know what I mean? What if you just never trained it on anything bad? You see what I mean? Like, would it invent evil? Right? Like, would it start to go rogue? I think that's what happened, by the way, in the latest Tom Cruise movies. The minute you let AI go rogue, it goes and invents mustard gas again for some reason. Like, that's silly. But as I said, this is where it's funny about, like, well, what's our intent and how do we even express our intent sometimes in meaningful ways is a challenge. And maybe it's great that we have this opportunity, because before it's like anything else, we just slog through it. Like you talking to me, Jack, you slogged through it. You got through another week.
yeah, but it was a good discussion. Yeah,
I think it's fun. We'll see if the world ends next week, and then we can talk about that.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully we can talk about it.
Yeah, we will. But hopefully it won't end. Yeah, world, don't end quickly because of some AI thing, because then we would have been wrong this whole time.
Yeah, and all the previous dates for the end of the world have been kind of called off, so we should be in a good shape.
That's true. We don't have one due for a while.
Yeah.
Next time, Jack.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike.